Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to share with you the top 10 most fun Ark Tames. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. In at number 10 we have got the Gigantoraptor, and the reason why I've put this creature here, as personally I really do find it fun to just go and ride around on one of these things, and then obviously you can just absolutely decimate tons and tons of creatures across the map. It really does just make for a very fun experience with a creature like this. If you can absolutely dominate the space across a map and just like kill everything in your sight, there is something inherently fun about that. The Giga kind of does do the same, but I find its mobility does lack quite a lot, and that kind of stops the fun compared to this creature, whereas you can just go for ages with this thing and you don't really run out of stamina, and the damage just keeps getting higher until that blood rage is full. So there's just a lot of element of fun just with you essentially feeling like you're on top of the world, like you're the strongest creature out there when you're on this thing. Obviously you're not, but still there's just so much fun in even taming these things, and also just for general use as well after you've obviously tame them. The taming process, I find, if it glitches it can be very infuriating, but if it actually does go smoothly, it's quite a fun and enjoyable one, especially if you got a few friends along the way. And sometimes if it bugs and you got a few friends along the way, it still does provide for fun experiences. You can just laugh about how the game is failing a lot, and you know, Ark players do like to do that a lot. But yeah, that's why I say the Gigantoraptor is a very fun tame. Next up we've got the Managarmr, and this creature is here as you can absolutely zoom across the map with this thing, and also just as a general mount just for traveling around on, they are really successful in the fun department. I find these creatures are just insane to zoom around with. Their mobility really does make them very fun creatures, and although their tame method doesn't really have anything to do with the funness scale, we'll call it for the purpose of this video, I find as long as it does go smoothly, it can be a reasonably enjoyable one to do, because it's not just the standard knockout tame. There is some sense of variety within it, which, you know, it makes these things slightly more interesting, you could say, to get around, which I think does hugely benefit these creatures on this list. And obviously the main reason why they're here is because of that insane speed. Having these creatures travel at such a rate really does make them insanely fun for me. And you know, as a player that doesn't usually tend to just go around with creatures like this, whenever I do hop on one, it really is sort of a breath of fresh air in a way, because I always love coming back to these creatures and using them. I really should use them even more, but they have been obviously nerfed since release. They're not quite as good as they used to be, but it's still nice to have that speed and agility. It really does add a huge element of fun to these things. Next up we have got the Astrodelphus, and this creature is here because, like, come on, it's got such an insane speed, and I promise not all the creatures on this list are just simply here because of an insane amount of speed, because, you know, although fast creatures are definitely really fun, maybe the funnest creature out there on the funness scale is not necessarily the fastest one. But for the case of the Astrodelphus, and also I'm going to say the Tropeognathus, it really does help significantly that they are fast. They would be less fun if they weren't, especially considering all the agility that they can do, and they can do it at such a speed. It's so fun and also just enjoyable to do. You really do love these creatures just for all of their insane mobility skills, and that's kind of what makes them really fun. The same goes for the Tropeognathus, and also with their immense amount of weaponry on top of it as well, it adds even more on top of it. They're just so packed with useful, nice abilities, and they're just well designed, very mobile creatures that really do go quite a long way for giving you a better playing experience. It really does have something to be said that these are some fun creatures. And yes, I'm putting two in at this spot because I was being a bit indecisive, but mainly the Astrodelphus, but obviously the Tropeognathus does fit into a very similar category of creatures, so I decided to put it here as well. Next up, in at number 7, we have got the Rhyniognatha, and this creature is simply here because, like, come on, who doesn't love to ride around on this giant insect thing? And although it's a little bit too OP for my liking, it definitely is a hugely enjoyable creature to ride around on and use generally across any map. Obviously they only spawn on the island and lost island in the swamp areas, but still you can transfer them to other maps and they're useful in a lot of other scenarios. Obviously they're great for just doing general PvP raiding, but they're just great as general travel mounts as well. They can pick up tons of creatures too, so if you want to get to some bosses fast, instead of herding all your Rexes up to the volcano, you can always use a Rhyniognatha. If that's something that you want to do, you can obviously just use cryos and stuff like that as well, but you know, if you want to do it that way, you can. Also, if you just want to take some creatures across the map, or if you don't have access to the cryos at the moment, you can always just take a creature back with it, although you probably would at the time that you tame this thing, unless you've been gifted one by like a server admin or something like that. Rare scenarios, but you know, maybe sometimes it would happen. Their tame method is pretty much the same as the Reaper, it's just been ripped off of it. Obviously it doesn't really count as a rip-off because it's made by the same people, but still, you know, I thought they could have been a little bit more inventive with the tame method, but it definitely still is an enjoyable one because I really do like the tame method of the Reaper, and you know, it's a very nice one to do. I don't really like the fact that now you need to use loads of materials instead of gathering XP. I prefer the Reaper's tame method in that regard, but apart from that, really fun and enjoyable tame method. I know you don't really factor that in usually, but I find the tame method is quite fun as well. It really does make me want to tame the creature more, and then once I've tamed it, if it's still fun, it really does just elevate it on this list. I'm just going to say, and it definitely really does deserve to be up here. It can demolish tons of creatures, it's fast, it can pick up tons of things, and it's such a great flyer for all kinds of things, and for that it really does deserve to be on this list because it can't be demoted for its insane amount of skill and power, and also just the amount of thought and design that's gone into this creature from wildcard. It really does just make it an even better one and nicer one to use. And obviously, sadly, you're going to lose yourself a creature, but I think it's all worth it to get yourself a Rhyniognatha. Next up, we have got ourselves the Velonosaur, and this creature is here because I really love shooting those spines out of this creature. I find that is just such a useful and effective ability. Like, I know it's not really the most complicated thing out there, but I really just do enjoy this creature's simplicity in a way. It makes it so much more enjoyable to me. Very easy to tame, and obviously you can get those Velonosaurs on Gen 2 as well. Like, honestly, great creatures to tame. If you haven't already and you have access to them, please go tame yourself a Velonosaur. You'll not regret it. Just for general use, they're insane. You can even take them into bosses if you want to. I'm pretty sure they can go into boss fights. If not, that might just be because I have some sort of mod installed. Obviously, maybe not the best boss creature out there, but still, I do find it fun from time to time to go out on one of these creatures and do some bosses with them, but mainly for just general travel around the map. I find them to be extremely effective, and obviously that's what I use them for the most, and I really do enjoy them for that. They're truly fun creatures, especially that spine attack that I was talking about there. It adds so much depth and character to these creatures, even though they're so simple. They're so basic in their simplicity that it makes them really fun because they're so simple. You instantly know what to do with these creatures. There's no faffing around with things. It is just boom, there you go, done. It really does make these creatures so effective in this department. In at number 5, we've got ourselves the Gigantoraptor, and I kind of feel like I have to put this creature here. I know it's still a really new one, but I've been really just enjoying it. It's a very mobile creature, and yeah, obviously you can throw eggs out to tame it as well, but I found just trapping it works just fine, and for me that makes the tame method a lot more fun because I don't really just go into all the process of getting those eggs, and the mini game is definitely a very nice one to have, and I like how inventive that tame method is, as it's something we've never seen before. I did expect them to be a little bit larger, but obviously that doesn't really matter, but you really feel like you can do pretty much anything with these creatures. Yeah, maybe they don't deal the most damage out in the world, they still can deal a hefty amount, and you can pretty much destroy everything on the map with these things, and obviously you can carry babies with them like you could on a Maywing. And you know, there's so much use out of these creatures, and I know they're only new, but still you can get tons of great use out of these things. Next up, we have got the Bloodstalker, and I really do love these things for just general travel and underwater exploration. As just me as a person, I've always really liked the thought of an ocean, and just oceans in games always make me just generally quite excited. That's why I really liked playing through Subnautica and Raft and all those games. They really are some of my favourites out there, and the fact that I can use the Bloodstalker to do some insane underwater exploration in Ark, it really does make it a hugely fun creature for me. And also just generally, you can just basically pretend to be Spider-Man going around the map. And obviously you do kind of get an awesome spyglass sort of effect as well. As you can see, all the aggro creatures just generally makes them really useful, because not everyone does have access to awesome spyglass out there. So you do essentially, once you have one of these creatures. And the tame method is pretty inventive as well, especially considering they did it first. You can obviously just feed them some moss chops prior to when you actually feed them the blood bags, which is obviously in your inventory in yourself, to get to 100 effectiveness. It's really not that much of a challenge whatsoever. And obviously on Gen 1 you can just get some hexagons anyway, and then from that you can obviously get you can get hexagons with the Bloodstalker from the Bloodstalker race missions. That's what I meant to say. It went a bit off track of thought there. Either way, insanely great just general travel mounts, and obviously great for underwater exploration, which is the main reason why I'm putting it here. Kind of a little bit undervalued relating to my last video. That'll be at the end of this video if you do want to go watch that to do with the Bloodstalker, because I find people don't use it for that enough, and it really is great for that. And obviously you can also just grapple creatures in and kind of suck the life out of them too, and if you have blood bags on you, it can heal itself quite quickly as well. So it's useful and versatile and fun in so many ways. In at number 3 we have got the Desmodus, and this creature is here just because, like, come on, it's the Desmodus. It is this like Nordic bat. Obviously I know it's not really Nordic in a sense, but it comes from a very Nordic map, which is why I'm obviously calling it that, although obviously it was much before the Nordic period when this thing actually did exist, if it did exist. Not to this scale though. I'm pretty sure it was actually an existing thing though. And this creature is just insanely great for PvP, and although I don't use it, I don't actually play Ark a lot in PvP, is what I meant to say. Whenever I do, it's really fun to just pick players off mounts with these things. Really useful ability. Also that gliding ability, general speed, makes them really nice. Just as a general fast traveling mount, it really does just make these creatures even more fun to me. And obviously with Sanguine Elixir, taming creatures becomes an absolute breeze, and you know, that makes these things even more fun for me to use. It's just pretty much an endless versatility with things that you can do with these creatures, and I really do love them for that, and I get so much fun out of many uses with this creature. Next up we have got the Reaper, and obviously I had to put this creature here. Come on, look at this thing. Like, this is that ultimate Ark creature capable of just so much stuff in the fun department. Its tame method is insane to get through. Like, I love taming these things. Again, I did say it with the Rhyniognatha, but I find it is an even better taming method than that. And also, I find they're just more fun creatures to use. They fit into the map so much better than something like the Rhyniognatha, and I felt like more thought and design has been put into them. And although, yes, maybe people would prefer to have that other tail ability, which does still torpor to creatures, which the Reaper Queen does, instead of just the one that slows down enemy creatures. That's the only one real downside I can think of the Reaper. They still are so fun to ride around on, as you just feel like you can decimate everything in the map. They can just deal tons of damage, and are pretty agile in the mobility aspect too. They can even bury themselves underground. There's like pretty much endless uses for these creatures, and I really do love them for that. There's so much you can do with a Reaper, especially if you tame a good one and you put all the effort in it. There's like no better feeling than really getting to that stage and getting that successful Reaper tame. It really does it always works out for you mentally. You really do feel so proud of yourself when you tame one of these things, and it is a hugely fun experience once you've done it right. And finally, in at number 1 we have got ourselves the Deinonychus, and I feel like this creature really does have to be here, as it deserves to be on this list, as it's so versatile in so many ways. Such a great fun boss creature. Once you've got a big pack of these things, there is no better feeling than driving these things straight into tons of creatures which are really difficult to kill, and absolutely decimating them with tons of blood flying everywhere, because of obviously that bleed ability, just grappling onto creatures and ripping them to shreds. It really is just hugely satisfying, and no other creature really gives me the same kick as these creatures do. I know loads of people get the same kind of kick out of something like a Shadowmane, but I vastly prefer the Deinonychus. The tame method, although not the most inventive, is actually just a pretty nice one. I like how it's just the Wyvern's tame method, but a little bit modified. It's a lot easier than taming a Wyvern as well, especially if you're taming Wyverns on Scorched Earth, and obviously then you can just assemble assemble a huge pack of these things and decimate loads of things across the map. They also do have insane amounts of speed as well, again making these creatures even more fun, because with more speed it is better on obviously that funness scale. These things also don't take full damage, so there's no kind of loss of immersion in a sense of where you can just kind of do what you want, and you're just so immersed in this creature that you have no care in the world for what's about to come up next. And obviously they can park up walls as well. Nothing really can stand in your way in terms of terrain, obviously, unless it's just lava, but no creature really can go through that unless you're obviously on a Magmasaur, but that creature's not on this list because, you know, in my opinion, that's still a good creature, but it does not compare to the Deinonychus, which is in at the #1 spot. In at number 10, we have got the Carnotaurus, and for me, this is a very bread and butter creature. It is almost a no-brainer for taming one of these things, and it may not be the same for you, but I do kind of come from a more, let's say, older time of playing Ark, and obviously because I've played the game for a while, I tend to like a lot of the creatures which are introduced a lot earlier on in the game, and I really did use the Carno a lot back in the day, and I still hold it up to a very high standard these days, obviously, and that is why I put it on this list, because I can't really imagine, like, my brain doesn't really work properly if I don't tame a Carno in all of my playthroughs when there's obviously Carnos on the map. It's just instinctively, I need to go and tame those Carnos, and some people probably aren't like that. Actually, quite a lot of people aren't like that, but from my personal experience and my personal taste, I really do just like, I need one of these creatures, and that may be the same for you. And also, if you did watch Squid's playthrough of Ark stuff back in the day, then you know he used Carnos a lot as well, and that really did build my reputation even more for the Carno, to see that popular YouTubers at the time obviously were using these Carnos for all their stuff, and it just reinforced my use for them. And still to this day I use these things to bits, and now they do also deal the bleed ability, which is, you know, just a really helpful thing to have, and obviously for you to use, because you can deal even more damage, and their mobility is really decent. Their health is pretty good as well, same as their stamina. It's not like maybe the best in the world, but it will definitely get you by. The weight is a little bit lower than what I remember it being, but that really doesn't matter too much for a creature like this. Next up, we have got the Pteranodon, and this is like pretty much everyone's first fly in the game. It makes sense to put this thing here, as it's just, it kind of forms quite an essential part of a lot of people's Ark playing, and, you know, for that, it definitely does deserve to be on the list. For those reasons, it is an extremely useful creature because its shadow is unlocked so early on, and you get yourself a pretty fast, efficient, speedy flyer, capable of doing some raids in the early game as well with that spin attack. The only real downsides being obviously their really low stamina and not great weight either, but you know, if you do tame a high enough level, that can be quite easily avoided, and obviously you can just level them up as well, which will vastly improve your experience with these things. The only real difficulty you'll probably have if you're taming one of these for the first time isn't really the taming, because it is simply done with the bowl and some Trancos. It's just, you know, getting all that necessary chitin or keratin. I would definitely recommend using chitin. Can take quite a bit, especially if you're playing on official server, because you need 75 of the stuff. The hide and the fiber at level 38 really shouldn't be that bad, because you will have creatures which are able to get that for you. Yes, that may be your only real difficulty with it, but it is definitely well worth it, and universally people use these things all the time, and it is really truly a great creature, and it's definitely one you should be getting into if you haven't got into one already. And if you haven't even played Ark yet, and if you're just starting out even, this is definitely a creature which you want to be aiming for. Next up, we have got the Thery, and the reason it's here isn't just because its shadow was unlocked at level 69.
Nice.
It is because this thing is such a great berry gatherer of all kinds of resources, including things like fiber, berry, wood, thatch, hide and meat, keratin, chitin. Those resources you can gather just the lot with this creature. Also, its saddle is unlocked relatively early, considering the use you can get out of this creature. Obviously, level 69, nice, is still quite late on into the game. It still is pretty early compared to some other options which would give you the same level, which actually, in all fairness, there pretty much isn't any. Like, obviously you have the moss shots for doing loads of fiber gathering, but it can't compare to the amount you can gather with this thing. It's got its little tickle fingers. It can really get in there and do all of what it needs to do. But also this thing is a very good contender, and it should be a great contender on your list for doing the dragon boss fight, as it is particularly harsh to carnivores, and obviously this isn't a carnivore, so you can avoid all of that, and the Thery deals a ton of damage. You can probably tell considering how large the claws on this thing actually are, and your only real downside to doing it this way instead of using traditional carnivores is that sweet vegetable cake, which you'll need to heal them up quickly and efficiently, can be quite a strain to actually get because they're quite expensive compared to just normal meat, which is very easy to gather. But if you have a Daedon, you should be alright. Next up, we have got the Thyla in at the number 7 spot, and this creature is so universally used across the island for its amazing travel and damage capabilities. It spawns in the redwoods on pretty much any map, but it definitely does spawn quite a lot in the redwoods biome on the island, so it is definitely a very good choice for beginner Ark players and Ark players which are just playing on their first map, and also people that are new to ASA as well, as the island is the first map you'll get and is the most accessible one to all Ark players out there. So it really is a no-brainer to get one of these things, and I know the redwoods can be quite a difficult terrain to traverse, especially in the early stages, but if you take your precautions seriously and you look around your environment while getting through, and you do bring some sort of suitable protection in case of an emergency happening and you being in quite a grave state of danger, then you should be really fine. The tranking of this thing is easy as long as you have it trapped, and then you have yourself an extremely great carnivore capable of dealing tons of damage and the bleed ability on top of that as well. They can also scale any kind of wall or vertical surface like you've been seeing throughout this B-roll. And the sad thing is with ASA's terrain, they do get a little bit stuck in a lot of places, but pretty much every creature does. So, you know, I wouldn't worry too much, but it just can be a little bit of a hindrance if you are playing in ASA, so maybe don't go up some of those steeper mountains with this thing, or if you do, then be aware that you might get stuck in some places. Also, you can see that bleed ability here being dealt onto a Kentro, which obviously they do deal damage back, but still you're going to be dealing tons of damage into that thing, and very quickly this thing is completely decimated. That's why the bleed ability is so good, because it works on a percentage based scale instead of just a raw damage scale. So yes, the Thyla is definitely a big contender, and you should be taming one if you have the map to tame one, which everyone kind of does. It's on the island and you're at the right level to actually do so. Next up, we have got the Desmodus, and this creature's sanguine elixir makes it really a no-brainer bread and butter creature for me. I will just go onto Fielder, get myself one of these Desmoduses, and then just transfer it onto the island or whatever other map I might be playing on. In the moment, I'm playing a lot of Gen 1 because I finished off Extinction and I'm going to Gen 1. I've done all these before, but I'm just replaying through them because I feel like it. Again, not really playing too much ASA, although I have got an FSR3 mod running on that, so it does run at quite a nice 60 now, but still, I'm just kind of waiting for some other maps to come out, and I probably will play the center when that thing releases, but I'm going to try and get Gen 1 done first. Either way, Desmodus makes Sanguine Elixir, is a blood bag farm, has the gliding ability, meaning it's a really fast, speedy fly, can go invisible in the night as well. Couldn't show that because I was in the wastelands biome. Bit of a numpty there. It can also grapple onto any kind of wall or ceiling like the Tapijara can. Just make sure not to dismount when you do this, because I know someone out there has accidentally done that, and I've done that as well. Just always remember to do the jump button and not the dismount button, because, you know, you're always going to get issues with things like that. In at number 5, we have got the Rex, and this creature is here just because it is one of those bread and butter essential tames. They spawn on the island and most maps. They also do have an X variant on Gen 1, which provides even better performance out of this creature. They are very big, hunking beasts, but despite that, they are ridiculously easy to tame, especially on ASA with that new baby mechanic. Otherwise, they're just a very simple knockout tame. Just get maybe a 2x2 or a 3x3 stone trap with some ramps on, walk it into it, and then simply knock it out and feed it your preferred taming food. Probably either prime meat, mutton, or the kibble required to do the Rex. Can't remember the kibble system, honestly, because I really use none of it, and some people might be a little bit triggered by that in the comments, but really, I can't be all faffed with kibble, and I will just use things like mutton instead. I don't really care too much about the 100% effectiveness or all of the faster taming. I can wait, it's fine. I do have some buffed rates anyway, so I'm not going to be waiting absolutely ages for any sort of tame. Obviously, once you do have the Rex Tames, you've got yourself a immense boss crushing beast with great health stats, a great amount of damage. Is lacking in the mobility side of things, but you don't really need that in combat, and their saddles are relatively cheap as well, and very easy to get on ASA as they're in drops all over the place, and you can very easily get these things even like before you even get a Pteranodon, because if you get like something like a Bronto to kill off the parent Rex, then you can simply just press E on that baby Rex and boom, you've got yourself a Rex. And as long as you're not playing on official, that thing will raise up pretty quick and nicely. Next up, we have got the Deinonychus, and this creature is here because it can do so much. It deals bleed damage to bosses, it travels at an insanely ripping speed, and it can do all kinds of cool parkour maneuvers, and I really do have to thank this tame for being in the game, as the amount of progress I've made with this creature throughout my Ark playing is insane, and I can't really imagine a world of Ark without this creature. Quite a lot of people are like that with the Shadowmane as well, but I find I'm not too miffed with that creature. I go occasionally through some phases of liking that creature. I still definitely do like that creature, don't get me wrong, but I find the taming of it just a whole lot of laborious nonsense, which I really don't want to get involved with. But once I do have them, I really do enjoy them and use them a lot. Just the Deinonychus is a much easier tame, and for me just a better creature. Although maybe it doesn't quite have the mobility of the Shadowmane, especially underwater. This thing doesn't take full damage, it has the pack buff like the Shadowmane, and it deals bleed damage to bosses, which the Shadowmane does not do, and as far as I'm concerned, no other Ark creature actually does this. So it gives it a huge edge, and obviously their attack speed is ridiculously fast as well, so they can really ravage bosses to shreds. And like I was saying before, they can parkour up any kind of wall or vertical surface. They really don't struggle with this whatsoever. It does take a little bit of learning because it's a less elegant solution than something like the Thyla, where it just walks up, the same as the Rock Drake. They do that, but you know, after you've just spent a little bit of getting used to, at least that's what it was like for me, this really is just a perfect creature, and I would definitely recommend you get one of these things. In at number 3, we have got the Bloodstalker, and for me, this is my go-to ocean creature, no questions asked, and exploring the ocean, doing underwater caves and all that stuff is quite a big part of my Ark playing, especially considering I'm doing a lot of Gen 1 at the moment. The ocean biome is quite prevalent throughout that, and obviously just traveling on this thing is pretty much like essential. It's essential to travel around in Ark, and on Gen 1 this is kind of your only option. But just on a broader term, across all maps, you can really get tons of use out of this creature for underwater use. Essentially, you can go underwater with this thing, you can skim across the top, and you can travel with such speed, and you can see the aggros of all the creatures as well. It is so helpful to have this, and I've been using the Bloodstalker for absolutely ages now. It's not just I'm Gen 1 biased because I'm playing a lot of Gen 1 at the moment. No, I've been using these things across all of Ark's maps. Maybe not Arboration, but you know, it's always finicky transferring things onto Arboration, so I don't really tend to mess with that map. But still, across loads of maps, it really is a hugely successful creature, and on Gen 1 and Gen 2 you can get so much more out of it as well, in terms of gathering hexagons as well. Those maps are slightly more designed around this creature as well, but still, with that underwater travel, any underwater scenario really does suit this creature, especially caving I found, as you can quickly get into there and get out with no problems whatsoever, because you can really just travel at a rapid pace, and you're so small, nothing really is going to hit you. So it is a no-brainer for me to get myself a Bloodstalker, and that is why it has made it all the way up into the number 3 spot of this list. Now, this is what my classical side will show, with the number 2 spot being the Baryonyx, because I just essentially need this thing to do caves. I won't really use any other creature. I've used creatures like the Shadowmane and the Deinonychus and things like that, but I always come back to this creature. It's probably some kind of weird placebo, but for me, it just does everything I need it to, and it works in such a way that I wouldn't want any other creature, no matter how OP, to do any of my caving needs. This just suits them so well, and it can do the underwater caves quite nicely as well, although that is where I would use a Bloodstalker usually to step in, as that thing is just so good for the underwater caves. But all the land caves, I will definitely get one of these things and then just plow through all of them, apart from on the islands, the artifact of the Skylords, because you know, you can't really fit any decently sized creature into that unless you want to take a dung beetle with you, I guess. But obviously they still can be extremely useful in the underwater caves as well. I did used to use them a lot. That spin attack does come in real handy. Just, you know, the Bloodstalker's overtaken it in that aspect for me. And people nowadays will be using creatures like the Shadowmane to do that, and that is definitely a very viable creature. But for me, the bread and butter, the basic one that everyone really should have is the Baryonyx, and that is why it is in at the number 2 spot. And in at number 1, we have got the RG, and this is just the most bread and butter tame out there for me. It is the basic, it is the essential Argentavis. I cannot imagine an Ark playthrough or an Ark world without this creature being in it, which is why I always chuck it in the number 1 spot for any of these lists. Firstly, it spawns on the island, therefore it is an extremely accessible tame for all players out there. It is a very easy tame, which can just be tamed with 2 wooden foundations, 2 wooden ceilings, then that would make, do the maths on that thing, 8, 10 wooden door frames, just some train carriers and a bow, and obviously there's sewing materials to make the saddle, and boom, you have yourself a perfectly tamed RG. You don't even need the trap, it just makes it significantly easier, and also having a Pteranodon at your disposal as well will make it easier because it's easier to aggro it over. But depending on your setting, it may already be on the ground, and it's a very easy grab. And once you've got that, once paired with something like an Anki and a Dodic, you can farm tons of metal with it, especially considering its weight reduction on things like metal, crystal and obsidian. Its saddle also acts as a portable smithy, so if you're out anywhere and any of your metal tools or armor breaks, you can always quickly repair it on the RD, as long as you do have some spare metal ingots in its inventory, which won't really be a worry as its weight is tremendously high, and also its stamina is decent enough to go over long distances. Also, if you kill any creatures, eat their dead bodies, you can have a nice neat little regen buff, and you can carry an extra small creature in its mouth. Just do with those abilities as you please, I guess. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I really hope that you all enjoyed this one, as I did definitely enjoy making it. As always, comment down below what is the most bread and butter Ark tame to you, and if you didn't agree, put your 10 in the comments below, and I will see you all later.